responsiveness to the customer, above all, means superior quality. When we talk about the quality issue in the United States, very often we tend to talk about it in terms of techniques to make quality better. I think it's terribly important that we begin addressing the quality issue as something that's much more fundamental than that. Now, where does quality come from? Let me again stay with a Japanese example, but a Japanese example in the United States. There are some things that terrify me about the Japanese as competitors. I'm certainly not terrified of their automation, because when you take a close look, they aren't as far ahead of us as most people say. I'm not terrified about their low wage rates, because they aren't so low anymore. But the following kind of thing really does scare me. The Japanese recently opened up in Smyrna, Tennessee, a new plant, the Nissan plant down there. Before the plant ever turned out its first truck, Nissan spent $63 million training the first line hourly people in the plant. That works out to darn near $15,000 a person. It's no wonder that they make things that work. Can you imagine walking in and asking for a $63 million training budget for a single plant, a plant that cost about $500 million? No way could that be accomplished in your typical American company. It's that focus, the focus on people and the preparing of people, that really frightens me about the Japanese. For the quality issue, make no mistake about it, is a people issue, pure and simple. Because think of it this way, maybe in the midst of a terrible, crushing recession, depression, maybe during that circumstance, you can order the average person to come to work from 9 to 5, 5 days a week. But whether it is a recession or whether it is a boom period, there is no way that you can ever order any human being, receptionist or scientist, to perform his or her job in an excellent fashion. Excellence and superior quality are all about voluntary commitment. There is no such thing as involuntary, superb, high-quality, excellent performance. That is, the focus is giving people a sense of commitment and involvement to the jobs of which they are a part. Who are these people who are participating? They're people who we sometimes call hourlies or non-exempts, or in some industries we call them temps or part-timers. In the ski resort industry, they refer to a lot of these people who aren't full-time people as ski bums. A wonderful phrase. I don't call them ski bums in the skiing industry. I call them the primary point of customer satisfaction contact. The whole issue really involves the view of the people who are working to get the job done for us. Can you imagine waking up in the morning, looking at yourself in the mirror, and saying to yourself, "Hey, hourly, how's it going? Hey, you non-exempt, how you doing? Hey, temp, how is it?" It truly disgusts me the degree to which we hold in thinly or not so thinly disguised contempt the people who are wholly responsible for customer satisfaction and quality within our organizations. The critical factor is commitment, and commitment through treating people as adults. Perhaps the two most interesting and effective quality programs that I have come across have come from two radically different parts of the economy. One from the textile industry, the other from a service industry, insurance. And let me quickly review them for you, because the heart of the matter in each instance is not automation, not capital spending, but a pure and simple focus on people. Milliken and Company, the $2 billion Spartanburg, South Carolina textile company. Milliken has long been a leader in manufacturing technology. But Roger Milliken, upon visiting Japan a few years ago, discovered that despite his lead, and he was even ahead of the Japanese by a wide margin, despite his lead in technology, he was way behind in productivity and quality. He came home and mounted a new quality program focused entirely on involvement of people. The plan included some of the quality circle operations, though they don't call them that at Milliken. They call them error removal teams. They call them corrective action teams. That was a part of it. The 5 to 10 person team involved now in problem solving. But much more significant was the process that they used to maintain the momentum around the quality program. For many quality programs in the United States in the last half dozen years have been launched with great fanfare, but then in fact have petered out after 18 months for lack of interest. The Milliken device is something called a corporate sharing rally, or something fondly called by senior executives at Milliken, fabulous bragging sessions. Quite simply, once every 90 days, several hundred Milliken teams, and when I say Milliken teams, it could be a team of receptionists, a team from purchasing, a team from MIS, as well as a team from a factory or from sales. Several hundred Milliken teams come into headquarters, and for the next 72 hours, these teams report 5 to 10 minutes each on improvements and new programs that they have undertaken in their area. At the end of these 3 intense days, every minute of which is attended by senior officers of the company, including 70-year-old Chairman Roger Milliken, there are awards given to everyone who attends. There's voting on the quality of each team's effort, the voting done not by executives but by the participants in the room, one's peers. And after that voting and at the end of the 3-day session, awards are given. Several hundred plaques are framed on the spot, and the chairman and president of the company make the presentations before the 3-day sessions end. Prior to these corporate-level sharing sessions, there have been smaller sessions, but with equal intensity almost, held at each one of their facilities. Those sessions are regularly attended by senior executives as well, many of whom are now spending 60 to 70% of their time on the road attending various level bragging sessions. And the top dozen teams, out of the ones who present at corporate, go on to make their presentations again, this time to a meeting of the top 10 officers of Milliken, the so-called Council of Presidents. So this process keeps the whole notion, the whole issue, the whole system alive and vital. The other program that I found so attractive was one instituted a couple of years ago by the Paul Revere Insurance Company, a part of the Avco Financial Services Organization. The Paul Revere operation in a service company included most of the attributes as did the Milliken program. In particular, a focus on this process of momentum building and momentum sustaining. Every person in the Paul Revere organization, some 1,200 at headquarters alone, every person in every function is a part of a quality team. These teams target their efforts at quality improvements, cost reduction improvements, and virtually anything that would enhance Revere's competitive stance. The program was kicked off in the year before the Olympics, and so the symbol for the program was an Olympic set of awards: bronze medals, silver medals, and gold medals. There was fear and trepidation as the program was introduced because there was some great fright that not that many people would get to the bronze level. Well, were they ever mistaken? Senior management involvement was high, excitement was high in a number of ways, and fully 126 out of the first year's 127 teams made it to the bronze level. Several of the teams did so well that they had to institute new levels: double bronze, double silver, double gold, and so on. Now in the second year, even though they went back to a zero start as the second year began, they're all the way up to a top winner who has a septuple gold rating. That is 7 times the gold level. It's truly incredible. The excitement that surrounds it is exceptional, and the cost savings and revenue enhancement through superior quality have been extraordinary indeed. These are the kinds of programs that have struck me the most. The important point, the differentiator, is invariably senior management attention and an exceptional degree of focus on the momentum building process per se. Some pieces of that I'd like to talk about briefly. Among other things, I think it is a national disgrace that decades after the introduction of the Scanlon and original profit-sharing plans, that a tiny percentage of our people are part of profit-sharing programs. Remember the Worthington Industries example, where everyone is in the profit-sharing plan and in fact elected to the plan by their peers. I think it's a disgrace if the people in our organizations are not part of some profit sharing, some gain sharing program. Likewise, employee stock share ownership still remains low. But let's keep on going to areas that are maybe even more extreme. I see no reason whatsoever for the role of the first line supervisor. Why in the world is it that 15 people in the average company with seniority of 6 or 7 or 8 years are not capable of managing themselves? What do they need a daddy or a mommy for to help them schedule their work and figure out who to talk to if they need help? I'm particularly excited about the fact, for instance, that the Ford Motor Company and General Motors in many of their plants have completely eliminated the role of the first-line supervisor. Elected team or work group coordinators have taken their place. But it's not only the giants such as General Motors and Ford. For example, there's a marvelous company in Sheboygan Falls, Wisconsin, known as Johnsonville Sausage. Johnsonville Sausage, in a tough business indeed, has increased their market share in the Milwaukee area from 7% in 1978 to 46% in 1984, and they're growing the business into many other areas and many other products. Johnsonville Sausage has 250 people in 3 plants. They have no supervisors whatsoever. Every worker is involved in plant design and layout. The workers do their own budgets. The workers are all capable and allowed and encouraged to stop the line if the quality is not right. They manage their own inventory. And in fact, the only managerial person whatsoever in the plant is a single person called a coordinator. The entire plants are broken up into things called pride teams, their equivalent of the quality circle. They have performance shares, which are profit-sharing plans for them. The performance shares are determined by self-evaluation and group evaluation. Nobody on top is assessing whether a person should be part of the performance share program. In general, these are pretty radical steps, but they're radical steps that are 50 years too late in the coming. If we're serious about quality and serious about service, then we must, by definition, be serious about an extraordinary level of involvement. Let me talk about a couple of subsidiary points. A principal reason that the involvement is low is because most of our organizations, tiny or big, are loaded to the gills with incredible numbers of Mickey Mouse, demeaning regulations. One of our colleagues who attended a seminar of ours, who runs a small division in a company, reported to us a few weeks after our seminar on one practical step that he had taken to eliminate the Mickey Mouse. And let me quote to you briefly from his letter. He said, "I bought a bright red mailbox, planted it in a bucket of concrete, and placed it in the division hallway outside my office. I commissioned a cartoon around the theme, 'Send Back the Mickey Mouse,' and promised that I would read every item in it and act within 7 days. I ordered a dozen porcelain Mickey Mouse statues and will award one each month to the person identifying the biggest nuisance. It's taking these issues like bureaucratic encumbrances and having fun with them, playing with them, and working on them to reduce them." The second thing that gets in the way, in addition to the Mickey Mouse part of the regulations, is just the volume of the regulations per se. If you remember, I mentioned before the colleague who owns 25 extraordinarily successful Burger King franchisees. He reported to us after an earlier seminar, quote, "We have gone through our policy and procedure manual with the restaurant managers and deleted about 2/3 of the book. This is an ongoing process in the company," unquote. In fact, he subsequently reported to us that he has set an objective of every year reducing the policies and procedures by fully 2/3. The Mickey Mouse rules, the excessive policies and procedures get in the way. So, in our larger and even, sad to say, our smaller organizations, do the excessive layers of management. We've long said that flatter organizations were the only answer to becoming more entrepreneurial and customer responsive. It's been a piece of conventional wisdom. Seldom, however, are numbers put to the issue. In mid-1985, the Chicago consultants A.T. Kearney and Company did a study of winners versus losers in virtually every segment of American industry, manufacturing, and service. The winners versus losers were determined on the basis of financial measures that I think most would agree with. What they found, quite simply, was that the winners had literally 4.1 less layers of management than the losers did. Moreover, the winners had fully 500 less central staff bodies, not total bodies, but central staff alone. 500 less central staff bodies per $1 billion in sales. Nucor Steel is the other winner in the steel industry, along with Worthington Industries. Nucor Steel has an $800 million company with 4,000 people on the payroll. The corporate staff at Nucor Steel, which is headquartered in 2/3 of the third floor of a non-obtrusive office in Charlotte, North Carolina, consists in total of 9 people, 6 of whom are plant managers. Likewise, Nucor Steel has only 3 levels of management in a $750 million company between the chairman of the board and the person on the shop floor. I always find myself at a loss when we get down to the truly gut issue of a belief about human nature. Quite simply, my loss and my unanswerable problem involves the following issue. I've come, sadly, to conclude that there are probably only 2 kinds of managers in the world, and not very many shades of gray in between. There is that manager who thinks that 73% of his or her people are turkeys, who would rip him off if he turned his back for more than 30 minutes. And then there's a manager who works only 25 feet away, drawing from the same population with the same demographics, who thinks that 98% of his or her people are superstars if only he or she would train the dickens out of them and get out of their way and let them get the job done. My sad conclusion is that both of these people are exactly right. The manager who thinks 73% of his people are turkeys who would rip him off if he turned his back for more than 30 minutes ends up with 73% turkeys who do rip him off if he turns his back for more than 30 minutes. And that manager 25 feet away, drawing from the same population with the same demographics, who thinks that 98% of his or her people are superstars, if only they'd train the daylights out of them and get out of their way, indeed ends up with 98% superstars who, if they train them and get out of their way, will do an extraordinary job. This grave difference, which impacts our ability to compete so much, was graphically illustrated for me about 18 months ago. I went to Oahu to speak to the top 1,200 Wendy's franchisees. It was a big affair with bands playing and trumpets blaring. It would have done Mary Kay proud. I get terrified when I attend such activities with 1,200 people and all that kind of hoopla. I was scared to death, frankly, before I made my talk. I was in this wonderful 3-foot by 3-foot room called a speaker's preparation room. They have such wonderful things for people who give talks as I do. And it was about 90 seconds before I was to go on. I was pacing back and forth like a rat. A giant human being, or so it felt at the time, and it actually turns out such is the case. A giant human being walked into this little room. Turns out to be David Thomas, the founder and chairman emeritus of the Wendy's organization. Thomas walks in, 60 seconds to go. He rudely grabs me right above the right elbow. He shoves me into the back corner of the room, and with his index finger of his other hand starts pounding on my chest. He said, "You listen to me." He said, "For the next hour, you personally are responsible for the 1,200 people out there in that room." He said, "You had best understand that those 1,200 people are the best 1,200 people on the face of the earth." He said, "Have you got that?" And he was very, very serious. The incident had a big impact, but it had a bigger impact when I saw the contrast only 2 weeks later. I went to attend my 20th reunion at Cornell and was asked to come and talk to the business school people as part of my visit up there. I gave my little talk, and after the talk, an older fella came almost racing down to chat with me. He came up to me and he said, "You know, you're the most naive person I think I've ever met in my life." It's a great conversation starter, I can assure you. I said, "Yeah?" He said, "You just don't understand." Turns out that he runs about 250-person facilities in the Northeast, older facilities. He said, "You just don't understand." He said, "Most of my people are third and fourth generation union families." And he made union sound like a dire social disease. He said, "That kind of person doesn't care about anything." I suddenly understood why this guy had the schedule and the quality problems that indeed he does have. I read a very scary speech recently, written by the head of research and development for Dow Chemical USA. Let me quote just a little bit from it. He said, "U.S. industry, run as it was by our forefathers in the tradition of our ancestors, grew big and powerful. We built the biggest steel mills, the biggest oil refineries, the biggest chemical plants, the largest automobile assembly plants, the largest smelters in the world. Boy, could we make product. We didn't always make the best, but we made the most, and U.S. industry became a model for the rest of the world. We were the model for size, for efficiency, but not necessarily for quality. You have heard the expression, 'it ran like a Swiss watch,' or 'it had the precision of a German machine.' We in the U.S. really didn't care. We left this specialized, high-quality niche in the marketplace to others, while we concentrated upon huge-scale, high-volume, mass production economics." He then goes on, "But then in the 60s and 70s, we began to get some hint that perhaps this was not nirvana, that some of our assumptions were askew. For one thing, we started to experience some competition from foreign producers, not just because they could make their products cheaper and faster, but because they were, for God's sakes, better. The car didn't fall apart at 30,000 miles. When you bought a television set from them, it didn't mean taking the repairman into your family. And on it goes. The plain, bald fact is that in most of our organizations, service or manufacturing, we don't have a quality orientation. It's the big things, it's the view of humanity, it's the tiny things. I read hundreds, if not thousands, of annual reports every year. Amongst the 1984 annual reports, I had a favorite. It was the annual report that came from that Nucor steel company that we mentioned before. Nucor has between 3,000 and 4,000 people on the payroll. Their annual report, quite simply, has the full names of each of those several thousand people. Small print, to be sure, on the front and back cover of the report. Small touch indeed, but oh, such a nice touch. Likewise, in the small but important area, another seminar attendee from the fast food business wrote us about his decision as to the use of the word employee. He talked about what he had accomplished in the 60 days after our seminar. Quote, "Rid the word employee from our vocabulary, replaced with team member to emphasize the importance of all workers at all levels, especially those closest to the capital C customer. I pay anyone in our company $10 if I ever say the quote E unquote word. I've learned quick. I also pay $5 to anyone who can eliminate the E word from a company form or routine report. To eliminate the E word or to put the name on the annual report is not an automatic winner, to put it mildly. However, it is such tiny acts, when coupled with a belief about people, that really do get to the heart of the matter relative to the quality issue. Lousy quality of product has hurt us from steel to semiconductors, and it's at least as bad in our service industries as it is in our manufacturing industries. Surprisingly, when one does thoughtful analysis, one finds in virtually every instance that we're not behind that much when it comes to technology and automation. What we are behind in is in the understanding that superior quality comes from people who are committed, people who care, people who are paid attention to. Perhaps quality is not in our genes, as our friend from Dow said, but it darn well had better be in our genes pretty soon, or we're all going to be confronted with a permanently lowered standard of living.